Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Vault Podcast. This is episode 2, where we talk with real people, have real conversations about real impacts. I'm Kyle Beckman, Vice President of Marketing and Customer Experience at First Bankers Trust. And today we're going to dive into an interesting conversation around manufactured housing communities, the industry as a whole, and the financing side behind it. So today we're going to talk with Michele Walgren from MHC Funding, which is a division of First Bankers Trust. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the business side, financing trends, misconceptions, opportunities, and we're going to learn a little bit more about the industry that Michele makes an impact in. So, Michele, thanks for joining us today. Excited for what you have to bring to the table. If you would, go ahead and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your work history, your experience, and what brought you to MHC Funding.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm happy to be here and talk a little bit about MHC Funding. So I lead MHC Funding. It's a manufactured housing community division at First Bankers Trust, like you mentioned. Our focus is to provide the financing solutions for the MHC owners and operators for acquisitions and refinances in the Midwest. First Bankers Trust is headquartered in Quincy, Illinois. So we have expanded our MHC footprint into 7 states that allow us to provide this financing option. Those states are Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. But aside from that, what really sets us apart from the financing option is that we're not just a lender. We operate as a long-term partner. So because we're a division of a community bank, we have full capabilities to help with the day-to-day for the owner and operator. That includes their deposit accounts, things like rent collection, vendor payments, fraud mitigation, and so many more. But we provide that exceptional customer service that we're known for. So that really is what sets us apart from just that financing piece.
That's great. Yeah, so it's a lot more that you guys have to offer, like a whole business suite, more than just the financing piece, right?
Yeah, and that's where we feel like we set ourselves apart. If we're at a conference or when we're talking amongst others that can finance these communities, well, that's where we really stand above some of those other options.
Okay. So for people who may not be familiar with the industry, what exactly is a manufactured housing community?
It's essentially a neighborhood where residents they own or rent their home and they pay lease for the land that it's on. So the owner and operator, they maintain, the infrastructure, the roads, the utilities, the common ground. But then the community, they provide the community environment for the residents. So it's just that affordable path to homeownership is what it is.
Okay, I got you. So when we think about that, and people who are specifically in the industry who might be interested, what would you tell them are some of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen, and how would you straighten some of that out?
So I think some of the biggest misconceptions people have are, they view this as the old trailer park stereotype. Modern communities are clean, they're safe, they're well run. Background checks are done, and the owners and operators they don't put up with that nonsense. So that isn't true anymore. Another misconception is that the residents move often. In reality, they tend to stay longer than renters and other housing options. And then from an investment standpoint, people assume it's a high risk, low quality, but historically, MHCs have outperformed many other real estate sectors in downturns. So those are all things we hear, misconceptions, and they're just simply not true.
Right. Good. Well, so you hit on this a little bit too about some of the strong opportunities versus risky ones and some of the misconceptions there. So what would you say really separates a strong opportunity from a risky one?
So and that's a great question because a strong opportunity, has consistent occupancy. We look at occupancy. We want to see where it's at, what the plan is for that. The infrastructure, this is a big deal. The utilities, the roads, these are huge. I mean, it's very important to understand that. A market with real demand, is it a super rural area? Is there demand? Will they be able to infill? So, that is something too that a strong opportunity has that demand for, the infill. and then a responsible plan. So every deal we look at, we want to understand, we need to see what that plan is, and we need to understand it and get behind it and believe that it's realistic. So, that those are the strong opportunities. When we see some of the riskier deals come in, there could be deferred maintenance, the weak markets, unrealistic pro formas. Are they trying to get too aggressive with rents? Is it unrealistic with the infill based on the location? So, those are some of the things we can look at to determine, is this a strong deal? Is this a strong opportunity for us to look at? Or do we feel that there's a lot of risk, more risk than that, we have an appetite for?
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially with, so again, kind of hitting on the risk and tying into the lending. Everything's changed quickly, right? We went through COVID. Everything since then has just fluctuated up and down really, really fast. So, how would you say the lending and the financing environment has changed over the past couple of years as it pertains to you guys?
You know, as we all know, rates have been very volatile. I mean, underwriting has tightened up across the board. That's just been, inevitable. Occupancy is important as vacancy is a huge risk. Heavy infill is risky. So we have to look at that in a way of going back to is there demand in the market? Can they do this? So we look at it in a standpoint in many ways like that. So even though in a tighter lending environment, capital is still available for strong operators with solid communities. It's still there. So not saying that it's been tightened up, can't do this type of business. Absolutely, that's not true. It's a matter of we need to know the plan. We need to know, that operator and understand what their plan is for the community.
Okay. So, to piggyback off of that, what other advice would you give to other people who want to get into this space and, whether it be a job or even to just finance their next MHC? What kind of advice would you give them?
Do your homework, find a mentor in the space, find someone who's been in the trenches. This isn't a passive asset. You're running a community. You're not just collecting rent. So understand it. I think there's a lot of chatter about it's a great investment, and maybe some just need to just dig in a little bit more. We are seeing a lot of, new interest. So we always encourage, get a mentor, find those individuals that, when we go to conference and all of the team that rallies together, it's such a family. That's how I knew I wanted to be in that space. It's such a family. So we always encourage those new to the space, partner with someone who's been doing it. They're happy to teach you. We know them, we work with them. So those are some of the things that we want them to do. Understand it, do your homework, partner with a lender like us. We're not just the lender who will finance it. We will help you avoid those pitfalls. We will be your true partner. So, that's our advice when we want to help someone who's asking, how can I get into this space?
Okay, good. What's a couple more for you? So, what would you say are one, two, three of the top most common mistakes that you see people make when it comes to this type of financing?
I think underestimating infrastructure issues, if it's the utilities, if it's things like that, that those can make or break the deal. If they have a lagoon, if there are things that there are issues and they don't take it serious and move forward, it could be something down the road before we get to the closing table that it doesn't work out. So it's taking that serious right out of the gate and understanding the infrastructure, assuming they can come in and instantly increase rents without improving the community. It's it most of the time there's an opportunity to increase the rent right out of the gate, but what are you going to do to improve that community for those residents? So and we see people do it all the time where they do improve that community. So it's something people understand that they can't aggressively raise the rent and not do something. And then understanding the resident base, they're long-term homeowners, they're not apartment tenants. And so understanding what that community is like, who it makes up, in that community, and making sure that you are addressing it appropriately and treating them as the homeowner.
Okay. Good. Well, that's really helpful. Is there anything else that we haven't talked about when it comes to MHC funding, the value that you guys have, what makes you unique, and then also how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah. So really, I just want to express that, like I said before, MHC funding, it's the best of both worlds because we're specialized industry experts for the financing portion combined with the full capabilities of a community bank. So we're more than a lender, we're the long-term partner. So the relationship doesn't end at the closing table. Really, it's just beginning. So that's kind of how we like to communicate who we are, what we do. We're not just here to help you finance your acquisition. We're here for the long term. So that's how we encourage reaching out to us so we can explain how we can partner with you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, best way to reach me, my phone is 217-228-8031, or you can reach me by email at michelle.walgren, and that's Michelle with one L, at nhcfunding.bank.
Great. Awesome. Well, appreciate you taking the time, Michelle. Again, MHC funding, that's mhcfunding.bank. Really appreciate you giving us some insights, breaking it down in a way that's easy for everybody to follow and understand a little bit more about manufactured housing communities. Uh, One more thing I want to close off with. What experience, what has your experience given you, and what advice would you give to somebody else just getting started in their career?
Let me think about this a second.
Put you on the spot.
You'll clip that out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be afraid to take a chance. In this situation, even with MHC funding, growth happens when you make yourself uncomfortable. That's where you learn, that's where you grow. So over the decades of years I've been in banking, I've done many different things and I feel like I wouldn't change any of it. It's led me to where I am right now. So my advice is to don't be afraid, jump, learn because you're either getting better or you're getting worse. You're not staying the same. So go for it. And just don't be afraid because I feel like there's so much to learn and just go out there and learn as much as you can.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Great one to close on. So, all right. Thanks, Michelle Walgren, again with MHC funding. Appreciate you taking the time with us. For everybody listening, thanks for tuning into the Vault podcast. Again, real people, real conversations, real impact. Be sure to follow along for future episodes as we continue to sit down with other business leaders and experts and other members of our community to have conversations that make a difference. You can learn more at info.firstbankers.com/podcast. Thanks again.